All right, this week we're taking a closer look at recruiting. Our colleague Michael Casagrande doing a deep dive for us, talking about how Nick Saban, one of his trademarks is bringing guys back from Alabama. Obviously, guys that have committed elsewhere decided they're going to come to Alabama. It's something he's been very good at, and each year he usually brings in at least one solid guy that is committed to maybe another high-power Power 5 school or another school in the SEC. And so I want to get both of your opinions and your takes on this. John Talty, Matt Scalici here. And, who would you say kind of highlights that class of those flips that Nick Saban has made?
Yeah, there's a long list of them that Michael has kind of gone through and detailed. Kind of fun as a former recruiting reporter to just relive some of those wild stories that you have to chase down. Sure. You know, to me, I think the school that has borne the brunt of Nick Saban flipping recruits probably worse than anybody else has been Auburn. It seems like he's really gone after them more than anybody else. And I have to think probably one of the most surprising ones and shocking ones was Cyrus Kouandjio, who not only did he flip from Auburn to Alabama, it was such a dramatic thing in the first place that he even committed to Auburn. He did it on national TV. His brother was already playing at Alabama. You know, everybody thought this guy's surely a lock to Alabama. He commits on national TV to signing with Auburn, and then we find out the next day that he didn't fax his letter in. He's not signed with Auburn yet, and I think it took another week or so to finally play out, but he ultimately signs with Alabama. Probably as close as you could possibly get to actually signing with another school, and Alabama still gets him.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there are two that kind of came to mind. You know, Derrick Henry was, originally committed to Georgia. Comes to Alabama, wins the Heisman Trophy. That's kind of an easy one. But just I think in terms of pure entertainment factor, Reuben Foster, was committed to Alabama. Then he flips, commits to Auburn, gets an Auburn tattoo.
That he claims was in honor of his cousin, correct?
That is true.
In theory.
Yeah, and then comes back to Alabama.
Right.
And so it was just a wild scene, just to go in the back and forth, and so all these kind of different stories and theories about, a visit he took to Auburn, what happened there, and then coming to Alabama. So there's a lot of just craziness with that. But then you have to have a big impact too. And so he was a very big part of a national championship team. Last year they fell a little bit short, but you could easily argue he was the best, one of, if not the best player, on that defensive team for Alabama last year. So it had a huge impact and really kind of made all the drama that kind of was part of the recruitment process worth it ultimately for Alabama, because he was such a great player for Nick Saban and what they did there.
Yeah, and you have to flip that script, and obviously there are guys that do commit to Alabama. As crazy as it sounds, they commit to Alabama, possibly their dream school, sometimes in-state guys, and then decide to go elsewhere. These coaches have different tactics and ways of getting these guys to switch over. Who would you say is at the top of the list of maybe the most dramatic that you've seen go from Alabama to elsewhere?
Yeah, guys, in terms of guys that got away, I think John probably will have some picks that fit this profile a little bit better than mine does. I'm kind of cheating a little bit here, because this is a guy that actually did sign with Alabama out of high school, but never played a snap, and in fact ended up playing for Auburn. It's Melvin Ray, who was a wide receiver, signed with Alabama in 2008, that same class that had Julio Jones and so many other great players for Alabama. Never played, ended up becoming a professional baseball player, and when he decided to go back to college, ultimately he ends up at Auburn, played a pretty big role for Auburn as a wide receiver. I remember made a very memorable play in the national championship game in 2013. So that's a guy that I think Alabama would like to have gotten on their roster at some point. May have been 2013, when they could have used just maybe one more offensive weapon to get them over the hump in that game against Auburn that year. But I think also in 2008 and 2010, when he would have been eligible as coming out of high school, Julio Jones had to carry a lot of the load for that Alabama offense back then, and I think having another elite wide receiver like that could have made a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, kind of piggybacking off of that, and I'm going to agree, this is Michael's #1 pick too. It's Keenan Allen, who ended up, going to Cal, and, has now had a really successful career in the NFL as a San Diego Charger. He was a guy who, again, there was a lot of recruiting drama. Alabama, this isn't, sometimes what we see with Alabama is guys flip to other schools, and it's almost kind of like Alabama pushed them out a little bit, like, hey, we might not have a spot for you. It might be better if you go here. And so you'll see them flip to different schools. Like Alabama really, really wanted Keenan Allen to the point, like, they were very upset when they lost him. And it's funny because it's just the way the world works, is that, one of the guys who's a big reason why he ended up in Cal is now a coach at Alabama, and you could easily argue that he's Alabama's top recruiter now. And there was another guy, Otis Yelverton, who's now a Mississippi JUCO school coach, who they almost hired last year too, who was involved in the recruitment. So the world is kind of like, it's all kind of come together at some point for Alabama, but he would have had a major role in that team and kind of continued their line of really strong wide receivers, and certainly had a good career at Cal, has had a great NFL career, and he would have had a great career at Alabama
yeah,
too.
It seems like things come full circle, and of course the coaching world, the recruiting world, and the everybody kind of is somehow interconnected in some way, shape, or form, especially when they go play elsewhere and then obviously come back to coaching. And Alabama just seems to reel them back in the coaching world. A lot of guys that formerly played there or had some sort of tie to Alabama. Now, finally, I want to discuss this signing period. So obviously this was passed. It's something that kind of had the coaches a little bit up in arms about, but now the signing period has now moved from February to December. So guys can now commit to the respective schools in December versus February. That this could change. This could change the landscape of college football. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really fascinating, especially if we just talking about what we're talking about, how it does impact this. I think both of us have covered recruiting for a while. Like some of the most fun, I guess, or drama, it happens in January and February.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a good chance that that's either goes down or is eliminated altogether. Because right now some of the guys that flip, it's because they don't have to sign, and so they can kind of keep entertaining other schools and decide what they want to do. Whereas now, they can say, you got to sign in December, and so the guy who makes that flip in January, well, he might have signed in December, or that school cuts ties because they know he's not fully locked in. So it'll be interesting to see how schools handle it. We'll still have flips, I'm sure. We'll still have decommitments and things like that, but maybe they happen earlier. Maybe there's more guys committing in September and flipping in December. I mean, there's a lot that could happen from it, but in theory, I think we might see a little less of the kind of flipping drama that we've had in the last couple of years.
And it already has gone down really in the last couple of years anyway.
Sure.
But I think what's interesting is that we're going into this first year of it, and nobody really knows how it works yet. Nobody actually understands what kind of difference it's going to make in that relationship between the coaches and the players, because ultimately this comes down to that. It's sort of an interpersonal thing, and can you convince this kid to trust you, and can you trust the kid? So it's sort of so up in the air and not a science anyway, that to me, this first year of it, where nobody really knows how it works, nobody has the new rules established of how this is supposed to go and how you're supposed to deal with a kid that maybe is on the fence in December, I think it could be a little bit wild, and I think we could see some coaches making mistakes about how they play things with certain recruits.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one thing, taking a look at that. I think there will be a lot of drama. It might be spread out a little bit more, but it might be increased because it's sort of a trial by fire situation for all the coaches and obviously the recruits as well. And of course, you can see that list, a very interesting list to see from Michael Casagrande on both sides of it, who Nick Saban's brought in, who Nick Saban unfortunately wasn't able to hold on to. You can visit us on AL.com.